Thanks, Mary, and thanks, Joe. I didn't get to say it in the earlier session because I suppose of the format of it, but I want to take the opportunity to thank Joe for his repeated invitations to come down here and to pay tribute to him for the incredible job that he does in putting this extraordinary event together year after year, maintaining the quality of the guest list, I would say that, but the sheer devotion to the public good and public service that it entails, I think is worth noting. Perhaps not surprisingly, I suppose when he spoke earlier, he almost suggested that the week is something to be endured, and he's paying tribute to you all for enduring 6 days or 7 days of windbagging from various guests. So almost it was a sort of novena or something to be done. Anyway, so you're very welcome, and you're very hardy, and you're very dedicated. And hello, as I said earlier, to everybody who is watching online in their countless millions. I was talking to my daughter, who's just about to just entered her teens and is full of guff already. I was speaking to her last night on the phone, and she was saying, "Oh, what are you doing in Donegal?" I said, "Well, tomorrow I'm doing a public interview with the Taoiseach, whom she has met and regards herself as something of a pal of." And I said, "We're doing an interview, and it'll be on a stage, there'll be a room full of people there, and I'll ask them questions." And she went, "Oh, that's really cool, Dad. You really have a cool job." Oh, I should have left it there, but I said, "You can watch it online." I said, "Seriously, Dad, I'd rather chew my leg off." But anyway. As you'll have noticed, I'm not Michael McDowell. I'm drafted in as a late replacement for him as we consider tonight's topic of what sort of government will we get. I think if he was here, I think what he might have said is what is needed is a government with a strong independent presence in it. Perhaps someone with a legal background and experience in government, and who lives in Ranelagh. So we'll consider in a few moments what sort of government that we might get and what sort of election that we will have. But I suppose too, in the obvious absence of any prepared speech, I'll try and reflect a little bit on what the Taoiseach said to us earlier on. I think it's fairly obvious, both from what he says and from our own observations of politics, that we are heading into an extremely difficult period for this government and probably whatever government follows it. The challenge that Brexit presents to the practice of good government and the intention of good government in Ireland is immense. Politically, socially, economically, in Europe, bilaterally with the UK, question of what it does to Northern Ireland and how that affects our relations, Dublin's relations with the North. All of these things are, as Taoiseach suggested earlier on, will be thrown into flux. The prospect of a no-deal Brexit, about which Taoiseach was reasonably relaxed earlier on, is, I think, the sort of thing that could lead possibly to a national government, certainly to the consideration of that option by the main party leaders. I get the sense from what Taoiseach said earlier that, quite wisely, I think, they're applying a fairly hefty discount to what is being said right now in London. And I think that's correct, because I think that Boris Johnson is not talking to Dublin now. when he addresses remarks at Dublin. He's not really talking to Dublin. When he addresses remarks at the European Commission and at Brussels and at other EU member states, he's not talking to them. He's talking to his own voters. I think he observed the career of Theresa May as Prime Minister being completely destroyed, not just by the challenge of Brexit, but by the fact she didn't have a parliamentary majority. First rule of politics, you've got to be able to count. And the numbers for her never worked. She did not have a reliable majority. And what is the lesson that Boris Johnson takes from this? I think the lesson he takes from it is, I must have a majority. And if I'm right about that, then he's moving towards an election. And if he's moving towards an election, he's not talking to Brussels, he's not talking to Dublin, he's talking to his own voters. You can win, and Blair won in 2005, a general election in the UK on 35% of the vote. I reckon Boris fancies his chances at getting 35% and then some. And I wouldn't be surprised to see an election in September there. I think that cabinet and those senior appointments that he has made, I think, are not for governing. I think they're for campaigning. I think the Taoiseach sees this, and I think Dublin sees this, and I think that's why they're saying to themselves, let's discount all this a little. Let's see what he comes back with. But whatever the outcome of that election, if it happens, it will present extraordinary challenges for the Irish government. To the question, when does the election happen? Unless that's Leo to say, no, you've got that completely wrong. Or it's Boris to say, I'm not bluffing, who knows? To the answer of when the election comes here, I give the same answer I've been giving for 2 years. When Brexit allows it. When there is a resolution, even a temporary resolution of Brexit, which could come in the form of a hung parliament instructing a caretaker government to seek a 3-month or a 6-month extension of Article 50, or a shaky Remain coalition government seeking the same thing to allow for a second referendum. Whenever that resolution arrives, then I think we have an election here. That election looks to me, in its first instance, to be a shootout between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. We were talking in at dinner on the days when Fianna Fáil, about Gareth Fitzgerald and Charlie Haughey, and of course the days when Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael both commanded 40+% of the vote are long gone. That's one of the structural changes that the Great Recession has wrought upon Irish politics. But albeit that they still don't hog 80% of the votes, the centre, in a way, has held here. It's smaller, and the bits that surround it are more fractured. But the next government will be anchored either by Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael, or by both. And if you look at the opinion polls and try and apply some political intelligence to them, and if you look at the results of the local elections particularly, which are much more important, as Noel Whelan, God rest us, would have told us were he here, and how we miss him for this sort of discussion. It's the local elections that really count when you're trying to figure out what they mean for the next general election result. So look at the polls, look at the local election results, and it looks to me like more or less neck or neck, with maybe Micheál Martin's neck a little bit in front. Looking at it at the moment, trying to crunch those numbers, the haul of seats looks to me to be, for both big parties, looks to be in the 50 to 60 region. So what does that mean? Well, it means that, as we noted earlier, government is going to involve either Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. But what's the extra bit? And that's the great political opportunity for the Green Party, for the Labour Party, diminished though it is, but yet still surviving, for the Social Democrats, and for a couple of independents that are interested in government, whether they reside in Ranelagh or not. Because they will be able to decide, if they so wish, they'll be able to decide which of the big two anchors the next government. And I'm pretty sure that Eamon Ryan realises this. He's waiting for the numbers to fall. He modestly reckons he might get 6 seats in the next general election. Something around double figures looks more likely to me, because I think that the engine behind that Green surge at the local elections, particularly in Dublin and other urban areas, that engine is not going to go away. Public concern about climate change is not going to go away, and that has to serve as a sort of political engine for the Greens. So if those guys want to do it, if you get that sort of red, green, they might have 20, they might have 25, they could even have 30 seats, they can decide not just who's in the next government, but an awful lot of what it does. That requires foresight. It requires hard politics. It requires facing down parts of your own party, be they in the Greens who remember what happened to them the last time they were in government, be they in Labour that remember the last time they were in government, or be they those independents who will have to be persuaded to join any government. But if they want to do that, and if they wish to achieve their political aims, then that opportunity, I think, is there for them. So, could this government provide the sort of government that Ireland needs? Well, yes, if it concentrates on good government, if it disciplines itself, if it promotes social mobility but doesn't bust its budgets, if it's willing to face down vested interests in the public interest, if it's willing to take difficult decisions in the long-term national interest and stand over them, if it rebuilds relationships with London after the rupture of Brexit and promotes a rebirth of the Good Friday institutions, if it reaches out to unionists without ignoring nationalists in the north. For all the challenges of Brexit, the strength of our economy and the underlying strength of our economy offers us the prospect of a period of productive prosperity. That depends on the politics, and it depends on political leadership, but it also depends on the support of voters and the choices that voters make for the sort of politicians they elect. All that is ahead of us. Whatever happens, I don't think it'll be dull. Thank you.